Mic check. 1, 2, 3. ABC.
Thumbs up if you can hear us.
Dr. Hilton didn't do it. And why is Paul Prime blacking out? You trying to make us there?
Dr. Hilton, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank
Okay,
you.
okay, thank you.
We're live.
Okay. All right, good evening. Let's pause for a moment of silence, and as we do so, let's remember all of those who are being so hard hit by the hurricane. Thank you. Let's stand now and do our pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, this is our Finance Committee meeting, and tonight we have present of course, myself, Cheryl Ray, as the chairperson, and we have Sean Reagan here in the district office. We have our superintendent, Dr. Martin Knox, here with us, and the assistant to the board, Ms. Amy Hanson. Virtually, we have Dr. Johnny Hilton and Brian Alston.
He's connecting.
Who is connecting now, and then Jennifer Miller, our CFO. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Thank everybody for being here tonight, and we are going to be reviewing some things that we've already heard, and maybe if any of you have some questions, we'll be going over those tonight also. All right, the first thing we needed to do is to have the approval of the agenda, and we'll do that by consent, so if there are no objections, we will consider the agenda approved. Any objections? Is Brian connected?
He's not.
Okay. Should I wait?
Let's see, just pause just a moment.
Okay. We're waiting for Mr. Alston to get connected.
We're gonna call him. I'm connecting by phone until he gets connected. Okay, Mr. Alston, you are connected by phone. Just we'll look out for when you get connected. There you are.
Okay.
No, you're not connecting.
I'll try.
Here, you want this over there? Okay, he's by phone.
Okay, what we were doing is approving the agenda. If we have consent, is that okay with you, Mr. Alston?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. All right, and then we also need to look at the consent agenda with our minutes from the last meeting that you had sent to you ahead of time. So also we will approve those if there's no one in objection. We okay with the consent
Yes,
agenda? Okay. Dr. Hilton? You okay? Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to start with the review of what we had presented to us at the last board meeting. Is there anything you want to say, Dr. Martin Knox?
No, ma'am, thank you for that, and good evening, Madam Chair. No, ma'am, Ms. Miller is ready to review any items as it relates to the general revenue and expenditures through June 30th, 2021, as of August 16th, 2021. So Ms. Miller, are you prepared to do that?
Yes, good evening, Chairwoman Cheryl Ray, members of the Finance Committee, and Superintendent Dr. Martin Knox. This evening, there are 7 items on the agenda that were presented to the full board last week, so I will just give a brief highlight of those items, starting with the general fund revenue and expenditures for June 30th, 2021. Based on figures at last week's meeting, we are projecting the change in fund balance to be approximately $8,256,241. Are there any questions that I can answer related to the general fund?
Could you just remind us of the amount that we're required to keep in the fund balance, and then what's recommended and how we stand in that?
Yes, ma'am. We need to have approximately 1 month fund balance in the general fund balance. That's the requirement by law. Our goal is to be at 3 months. That is a good fiscal situation to be in, and that would be approximately $30 million to have 3 months of general fund operating expenditures in our general fund balance.
So we're possibly there once everything comes through?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And when will that be? What's your projection on that?
The audit will be completed by December 1st. That's when it's due to the State Department. We usually wrap that up mid-November, and it's presented to the board right prior to that issuance to the state, or the meeting right after that.
Okay. Anyone else have a question? Okay. All right, we can go to the next.
Yes, ma'am. The next one is your general fund revenue and expenditures through July 31st, 2021. Right now, we're leaving the projection pretty much the same as what the budget was. There were just a couple slight variances. One was in some miscellaneous local revenue, and then the other was in our Revenue Code 3992, our State Forest Commission. That check was presented to the board last month, and it was about $43,000 less than what we had budgeted for. So I did adjust the projection for that. And at this time, I have not adjusted any of the projections for expenditures. The amount remained at what we had budgeted for.
Any questions? Okay, go ahead.
I think it's line item 3-160. I believe that's the school bus salaries. Does that come out of the general fund balance, or is that money sent from the state to pay the bus drivers? How is that?
That is money sent from the state for the bus drivers, and that is based on the state's salary scale, which, just like our teacher's salary scale, is much lower than what we are actually paying our drivers.
All right, and I had a question now. This reflects the raise for the classified employees. And I know that we got the mills to help with that. What percentage did the district have to put in to give that raise?
Yes, ma'am. The millage was increased by 2 mills, which was approximately $350,000 of additional revenue. The increase for salaries just for the non-teachers was over $600,000. Plus we had the teachers raise, which is mandated by the state but not fully funded by the state. So while we did receive $350,000, we spent $600,000 for the salary step, or 1% increase for those not on the scale that are non-teachers, plus what the increase for the teachers was.
All right, so in general, it was 1% for teachers also?
I'm sorry, can you
Yeah,
repeat that?
we put in 1% more for the step increase?
If somebody was on a scale and they maxed out at the top of the scale, instead of not giving them a step because there's no step to go to, we did give them a 1% increase. So all employees should have received something for an increase this fiscal year.
Okay. And I know that several months ago, we started talking about our salary scale. And that's something I'd like us to continue and maybe with the full board is talk about how the salaries are determined and the formula and delve into that and see what we can do about those, you know, inequities with among the salaried people and work on that. Also, I wanted to know were we still considering the retention stipend? And where would that come from?
Yes, ma'am, we are still looking at the figures to determine the amount and if that could be done as of the June 30th numbers. We'll know more once we close out the fiscal year where that bottom line ends up. We need to keep in mind that we need to try to maintain 30 million in our fund balance and then also be prepared for any revenue reductions this year that we have not budgeted for, such as if there's a decrease in enrollment, again, we would have to decrease the budget $2,516 per student that enrollment decreases. So we just have to keep looking at the.
You have a question, Dr. Hilton?
I do. When you say we need to keep 30 million in our fund balance, that is your recommendation, or where is that recommendation coming from?
That is a recommendation that's used in governmental accounting and just good fiscal business practices to keep a 2 to 3 month reserve in your fund balance.
And that would be a 3-month reserve.
Yes, sir.
But that is we're not under any kind of restrictions or requirements from the South Carolina Department of Education at this time, are we?
Other than the 1 month requirement of a fund balance.
They require 10 million in the fund balance, and we have 30 million.
It is.
30, actually about 34 million.
I can't say it's exactly 10 million, but you are correct. It is a percentage of 1 month of operating expenditure. So depending on how large your budget is, determines that amount. It's somewhere between 10 and 12 million. Yes, sir.
And we're about 3 times that now, about 33 or 34 million.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
And I know at the meeting the other day, we did talk about, you were basing it, some of the revenue now on the student enrollment that you had just estimated. Do we have some numbers now? I know we don't have official till later, but can one of you give us the student enrollment as of now?
We know we're down, and I can give you the specific number.
I'm having a little trouble hearing.
Yes, sir, I was looking for the specific enrollment number because we've been talking about our enrollment and monitoring where we are in terms of our students attending school. And with the transition and children coming and not coming as a result of quarantining or illness, the number fluctuates quite frequently. But I do have numbers here. The team with Miss Addison and Miss Barth, they've actually been providing me with updates on a regular basis in terms of the enrollment. I'm just trying to pull that information right now.
And while she's pulling that, I can let you know the budget was prepared off of 15,211 students. And that was a 130 increase in students from what our 135th day enrollment was last year. So we started with the 15,082 students. We increased it by 130 to get to that figure.
So based on the last numbers that I have, our enrollment is at about 12,867. Nope, let me
No,
rephrase
we've got
that.
a,
Nope.
15,403.
15, it keeps changing, right, so the projected enrollment is 15,603. As of the 23rd, we were at 15,674.
Okay,
And last year at this time, we were at 15,683. And as I said, we update the numbers every day, because we have students who are newly enrolling and we have students who withdraw.
Sure.
And then we also still have students who have not attended school due to illness or being quarantining. So we're, again, continuing to closely monitor our enrollment.
okay. Any other questions on this part? No questions? Okay. All right, Ms. Miller, we can go to the next section.
Yes, ma'am. You have the capital projects in front of you. They're funds 519 through 526. And I have rolled those forward to fiscal year 22. And if you have any questions on those, I'll be happy to answer those.
Any questions? I have a few questions if nobody else wants to go first. Okay. I noticed in Fund 521 and 522, we have money allocated for painting. Is that, and I didn't look at the locations, but is that specific places, and when is that gonna start?
So it is by location. We are looking at most of our schools. So if you look at there's another attachment that shows the area. So I believe that at this point, if you look at it, we're looking at, I have to go.
Dr. Martin Knox,
Yep.
if I could chime in, 521 is in a, just a general account with the location of 00 so that it can be allocated out. We call it a master account, and then once we, based on priority of schools, which locations need to be painted, it'll pull into the proper location number for the accounting side of it. And I believe that is how 522 is set up as well. Yes, ma'am, 522 is set up the same way. So the accounting side of it is a master account, and then it gets coded to the actual school location once the work has been completed.
And those would be major jobs. So we still do smaller jobs just by school. Do we
Yes,
have
ma'am.
painters in the schools? Some of the,
We don't have painters in the school, we just have the individual who does the painting for the district. And so, for example, I was at a school the other day and they were working on one of the schools that was in need the other day, but we have an individual who works around the school day so that we are not interrupting instruction.
all right, in Fund 523, we have money allocated for the HVAC units. I was wondering, how is that affected now that we have the contract with Train and also the ESSER funds? Are we still using that?
Yes, ma'am. We are still using the HVAC money that is budgeted in the capital project. The train project is only funding for 2 of our high schools that have the oldest and most worn HVAC units. And so the train project includes the ESSER funding for HVAC work. And then this funding is still needed because there's more than just 2 schools that need HVAC work.
And I know that there are, of course, gonna be problems with air conditioning throughout the district, so where are we on that? And we have to get there and get repairs or in a timely way?
So there are a couple of things that are occurring right now. So we have schools who have experienced AC challenges. What we've done is work closely with the principals, and they've been doing a great job of doing so. They've relocated children in the building where possible so that they're in an air-conditioned area. We've also invested in floor model air units because one of the air units cannot be repaired, it needs to be replaced. So those items have been ordered, and some of them are on back order. But as quickly as we get that, the materials in, the work is being completed and taken care of. But in the meantime, we have offered alternatives such as moving children, relocating children within the building, and utilizing floor air units and fans, etc.
Okay. All right, and in 524, I know we've talked about this before, where are we with the trailer removal? I think it was Lamira and Wilder, and I noticed that, which maybe was still there.
So we have actually done a couple of things. There's been work to auction off those items. One of the schools actually had a buyer, but then the buyer couldn't find someone to haul those units off. So there was a meeting just the other day to discuss an alternative with that person who actually owns the trailers, but they're still on the property. If they're not able to get them, then many of them will be demolished. We did an RFQ for someone to do the work, to do the demolition of those units. And we are, do you know where we are in the process of those, Jennifer?
I'm not sure where we are in the bid process with that, but I do know we gave a deadline to that purchaser on the other portable.
So there's a different answer for each one. So we have purchasers for some of them are marked for demolition. I know that we've gone through the bid process for individual companies to come in and demolish the units. I do not know that we've solidified a company to do it. I know that it was out for bid, but I can get a definitive answer for you.
Okay. All right, and then on Fund 526 had the Sumter Academy renovations. And I didn't quite understand. I know there was a lot more in that fund. It says 27,000. Could you explain that, or give us the total for the renovations?
Yes, ma'am. That is what carried over to the fiscal year 22. I was trying to simplify the spreadsheet. It was getting very long, carrying the balances forward. And so that's what carried over. So that's the funding we had left at June 30th. And if you give me just a second, I'll pull up the actual spreadsheet and unhide those columns and give you the total. Okay, and the total for that project was $300,000 was the original budget. We had to reallocate $143,000, bringing the adjusted budget to $443,053. And the expenditures for fiscal year 21 were $415,393, leaving a balance of $27,659. As the budget carrying forward. And as you can see, we've gone slightly over. And so as we finish up other projects, I will do a closeout of this project by another project that we come in under budget.
All right, so the total was 443,053 for the
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I also wanted to ask about the marquees that I think we discussed that a while back. Have we looked into that, starting that for the schools that needed the new ones?
So we have looked at those. I think the last discussion we had was replacement due to size, but what we're going to do is to prioritize those schools that actually need one and do not have one, or those that are in bad condition. So we're looking at those first, and then we'll come back and review those based on size and making sure we can use them as a venue or methodology for communication with our communities. So yes, we are. I think probably Sam should have been on this call today, and I did not ask him to come on. But to answer the question, yes, ma'am.
So, well, you think that'll be done pretty quickly now?
So yes, Jennifer, do you have that document that we last discussed in terms of the marquees when
No, I don't have the document, I just have that the original budget, locations were Sumter High, Crestwood, and location 61. I don't have it all memorized, sorry.
I don't wanna give you the wrong names, and so that's why I was double checking. And so, if I may go back real quick to the demos, the answer to your questions around the demos, the bids went out and they're due September 10th.
Okay.
And in terms of the painting, they're looking to paint the gym areas, the hallways, and some classrooms, in terms of the painting on the inside. And then what I just said, the marquees are being prioritized by older units, so,
Instead of just those
Yes, ma'am.
original.
yes, ma'am.
All right. And I know that some work has been done on the athletic fields. Where are we with that across the district?
When you say the athletic fields, are you talking about the maintenance?
Practice fields, I guess, located at the schools, different schools.
So I know we have a contract with, the company that will keep our lawns maintained while we're waiting for our sprayer to come in so that we can take care of it. We have that contract in place until, I believe it's the middle of September or the end of September. But in terms of the practice fields, I will have to get you information. I just sent a message for that information, and I'll have it for you in a moment.
And a question has been brought to me, and where are we with working to make things equal for the Title IX situation with the boys and girls sports? There seems to be a big difference sometimes with what the girls are using and what the boys are.
I'm not familiar with that being an all
An
around the
issue?
district issue. I know that there was one matter that I addressed, and we had been working on at one of the high schools, but that was the only one that I was familiar with.
Okay, so can we maybe look at that? and
Yes,
See
ma'am.
if, it was brought to me as a possible problem, so maybe see if it
Sure.
is.
So, was there anything specific about Title IX? Was it materials? Was it access? Was it?
Well, I think, some of them have things like a concession stand at one field, maybe not at the other, and I don't know how, how much has to be the same for the different sports, but.
I'm familiar with the storage one, and that may be the
Storage,
same
yeah.
one. Yes, ma'am.
And then just the.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but again, I'm having a little trouble hearing y'all. And if there's any way y'all can either speak louder or get closer to the microphone, I apologize.
No, you're fine. I think the problem is me with the mask on. I'm sorry, Dr. Hilton. That's not intentional. I think it's the mask muffling me.
Well, that is a factor, but I'm all about masks, so talk a little louder or get closer to the microphone.
Can you hear me?
Thank you. Well, there are times when I hear you talking, but I can't. It's hard to understand exactly what you're saying.
Okay, all right, we'll try to do better.
I apologize.
Yeah, we were talking about the athletic fields and making them equal for the boys and girls sports. Just checking on that because that's in this fund that we do have some money allocated there.
That's fine. I will double check in that to make sure it's not a bigger issue than the one that I'm familiar with.
Okay.
I was not aware of that concern, but I'll definitely get an answer for you. And I'll get an answer for you as well for the athletic fields.
And I have one more question and then I'll see if anybody else has one, but I was wondering where we are with work orders. There seems to be the perception that they're behind, or there are things that have been submitted that have not been addressed yet. So could you update us on that?
So I know that we use a system that work orders are put in, and that has been something that we've been working diligently on rectifying, if you will. Previously, there was a directive for principals to start all over again with implementing or inputting that information in terms of repairs and repair orders. However, with us being short-staffed, if you will, in some of the areas, so there probably are some orders that have fallen behind. But we are working diligently to make sure that, one, we're not letting the staffing deficit get in the way of the work. But we are, again, making sure that when that information is input in the system, that our maintenance and our facilities, or whomever it falls under, is going into the system and updating the documents to indicate that the work has been complete, while also communicating with the principal to let them know where we are. We actually had a conversation a couple of weeks ago about customer service. If a principal or someone puts in that information and you go in and repair it and you never follow up with that individual, they don't know that it's been repaired, particularly if it's not been input in the system. And so we've been working diligently to make sure that we are talking about customer service. We actually used an article from one of a larger Fortune 500 company about customer service. If you've not spoken to me about the work, then I believe it's been ignored or overlooked. So we are working diligently to make sure that we streamline the communication, so when work does take place, the principal is in the loop, and the building service worker or whomever it is in the building who's overseeing that project or that repair that needs to take place.
Okay, good. All right, any questions from anybody else? Mr. Reagan? Mr. Alston?
Yes, I just have one question. The list, when you were speaking of the marquees, will that list be shared before that work takes place, or has that list already been compiled to address those marquees? I know you said they were going to be prioritized.
Yes, yes, I can do that, Mr. Alston.
Okay.
Did you hear what he asked, Dr. Hilton? Okay. Anything else? I know, you were muted.
He
He asked,
asked about marquees, not,
yeah, the list, would we see the list of the prioritized list?
yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, all right, so I think there are no more questions on the capital fund, so Ms. Miller, we can go ahead.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. The next item is the ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 update that was presented to the board last week. It just shows where we are with those funds. With the ESSER 1, we have $61,843 that was unencumbered as of July 31st, 2021. And then with the ESSER 2, we have $11,740,300 that's unencumbered as of July 31st, 2021.
Is there a deadline on those?
Yes, ma'am. ESSER 1 has a deadline of September 30th, 2022, and ESSER 2 has a deadline of September 30th, 2023.
I have a question.
Okay,
The ESSER funds for technology, let me see how I can figure out, look at that now. That's line 9 on ESSER 2 with 192,000 remaining.
Yes, sir.
So did we buy Chromebooks with those, or can we buy Chromebooks with those?
You can buy Chromebooks with those. What we really focused on was the software to help us with the remote learning and continue on into this fiscal year. And then there were also some devices that were purchased, laptops for teachers and paraprofessionals.
Did we buy any new Chromebooks over the summer that were to be distributed this year as students return to face-to-face learning?
I don't know if Mr. Jonas is available this evening. I'd have to look into that and discuss with him and get back to you on that.
the reason I'm asking is I've been hearing that in some instances, that some kids don't have a Chromebook or more than one kid is using the same Chromebook, or there's some issues with Chromebooks that I'm hearing about, and it concerns me. I think we're supposed to have, every kid's supposed to have one, and maybe we need to do an inventory and follow up here to make sure that every kid has a Chromebook, particularly with all these quarantine students going on. This quarantining that's been happening lately. I'm concerned about what I'm hearing about Chromebooks and students having access to them.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
And may I just chime in? We have Chromebooks for all students, so what I need to do at this time, hearing what you've just shared, is making sure that we communicate how a Chromebook can be retrieved from the school, but we do have Chromebooks, and there may also be Chromebooks that need to be replaced for whatever reason. But to your point, thank you for bringing that to my attention. We'll definitely make sure we get a message to principals to make sure that our community recognizes and knows or understands where and how to get the device for children.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, the ESSER 2 funds, well, I think in both of them, we had sanitization. What kind of things were bought there? And I see we still have some money left there for the ESSER 2.
Yes, ma'am. Those were for your personal protective equipment, PPE, so that would include masks, face shields, gloves. It also included sanitization, sanitizer and the dispensers to put the sanitizer in, cleaning supplies, wipes, all those type of things. We did the electric spray guns and the cleaning solution that goes in those. That was also purchased with these funds.
Now, we talked about the masks at the last meeting. Do we have those in the classrooms now? Do the teachers have wipes and hand sanitizer and all that?
So the answer is yes. What I did is had, again, conversation with principals about the manner in which we're distributing masks, and many of the principals shared that teachers did have masks designated for their classrooms. Some of the other schools with our older learners actually put the masks in a central location in the building for the children to take them as they need, because they break and they pop and all those other factors, but they're readily available for our students. And they continue to communicate how and where a child can retrieve if a teacher does not have them. But they do have masks, and they should have wipes. And if we have teachers who do not have wipes, I would ask that they communicate with their administrator, and then we would be made aware of the needs of materials within the schoolhouse.
Let me follow up on that. Did you say in some instances the classrooms are the masks are in the classrooms, but in other instances they're not in the classroom?
No, they could be in both, but yes, Dr. Hilton, you did hear me say that.
Well, I would think that the classroom is that every teacher should have a supply of masks in their classroom to make it easier should a student want a mask or they fell out of that book bag when they, walked from one part of the building to the other, that they would have access to a mask in every classroom, I think would be advisable. Thank you.
Okay, and this is something we touched on a little bit at the meeting, but I'd like to know a little more detail again about the mental health services. I know that we were told some of that was salaries, but could you maybe tell us what else that was? That would have been salaries for social workers and...
Yes, ma'am. In ESSER 1 and 2, that is for social workers. And I'm just looking for my sheet that I have on that. We have budgeted for 3 contract social workers out of ESSER 1. We currently have one of those positions that is filled through a contract agency, and it also does include a small amount of supply expense for each of those positions, along with travel reimbursement for the mileage going between locations.
Okay, so that came out of ESSER one.
ESSER 1 and ESSER 2.
So is that projected to take the money that's remaining, because that, in ESSER two?
You have to remember that these budgets are for a fiscal, for the first one, ESSER 1, was slated to be spent by June 30th, 2021, but because we had those 2 vacancies, they were not. So we have funding available in there that we'll use up first. Then we'll move over to ESSER 2, where we have the budget for those 3 positions. And then, of course, we can do an amendment if needed, if we are unable to fill those positions and move those resources to an area that we have a higher need that we've assessed as we continue to move forward through this.
So all of that is salaries and then their supplies they need and travel.
Yes, ma'am. The supply and travel is $500 each, so the majority of that would be for salaries. And when you have to outsource this, you have to pay the contract fee, which is much higher than what you would normally pay for a salaried position, but it's not too far off from when you take a salary plus the benefits. So we are saving on the benefits, but there is a little bit of an increase on just per hour with the contract.
Okay. All right, and could you give us a little information on the things that were done for air quality from these funds?
Yes, with ESSER 1, we did not have anything in air quality with ESSER 1, but I do know we were in the sanitization category. We were purchasing the MERV filters that had the higher rating because we had the study that was done that compared the 3 available options, and it was concluded that the filter MERV increase would be the most beneficial to the district. And then in our ESSER 3 funds, or in our ESSER 2 funds, we have improved air quality, category 14. That's $5.9 million. And again, that is the HVAC replacement for Lakewood High School and Crestwood High School that is being done in conjunction with our train project. And then in ESSER 3, which we'll get to in a moment, there is additional improvement to air quality budgeted.
If I may,
Yes.
so talking about these filters now, so what was the MER rating that we're supposed to have in every classroom at this juncture?
I have to pull my report. I'm gonna have to go back to one of the presentations last year.
They should be MERV 10s.
Okay.
I had a question raised about some filters, and I'm not a HVAC person, but there was some question as to whether these filters were actually MERV 10. How do you know that? How do you know it's a MERV 10? Does it say MERV 10 on the filter?
The filters are marked and labeled, and so are the boxes that we receive. Yes, sir.
I see. So if I walked in the classroom and I pulled it out, it would be marked MERV 10.
It should be, yes, sir.
I see. Okay.
And so when we order them, the boxes that they come in are actually marked with the MERV unit on the outside of the box. And so those are the ones that we've switched to.
And when it went up from a MER 8 to a 10, is that, am I remembering the
Yes, sir.
discussion correctly?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay, all right.
because if we
Thank
went,
you.
So did they leave what was left of the 8s and just switch to the 10 now, or are some of them still using what was left?
I believe they're all gone. I can double check on them because we didn't want any confusion in terms of the units that were the filters that were being used. I believe we got rid of them, but I can get the answer for you for that definitively.
And I've got one more question with ESSER 1 and 2. Are any after-school programs coming out of these funds? And where do we have those? They are.
We actually did after-school tutoring out of the CRF funds. Those were the Corona Relief Virus Funds, which were Fund 217, which are not the ESSER funds. If you recall, we had LEAP money and ARC money that wasn't spent through the state, so they repurposed that funding and called it Corona Relief Funds. And so we were able to utilize, there were 3 allowable categories. It was sanitization, technology, and after school tutoring. And so we were able to use those funds. So those funds had to be spent by September 30th, 2021. So we used those funds first and did our after school tutoring in the spring time frame. And then right now we do have funds allocated for after school tutoring out of ESSER 2.
And do you know where those are?
So we have, I can get you the specific list. We have some schools that have been utilizing their Title I monies for after-school programs, but we're trying to make sure that we support all of our schools with the monies for the, what is classified as learning loss.
Right. Okay. Uh-oh. Oh, here it is. I see. Thought we lost him, but we gained him. Okay. All right, any other questions on ESSER 1 and 2? All right, Ms. Okay, Mr. Reagan.
The line 3 with the nurses, I think we went over that the other night, but the $710 $1,000 that's left in there, is that for future nurses and or instructional support staff, or that's just, what are we doing with that? I don't know. We're looking for more.
Yes, the money for the nurses is actually, we have 5 contract nurses currently that we have engaged. So that is for our contract nurses that we have obtained through a vendor.
Okay.
And then there's also in ESSER 2, it's nurses and instructional support staff. So those are going to be the, I don't want to misquote on these, I'll have to look exactly which, those should be the instructional coaches that we obtained for the increase in technology with the new
Correct.
software. We needed instructional coaches to coach everyone how to use the software
Okay.
and platforms.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're ready to go on to the next.
Okay. And on to ESSER 3. This was presented to the board last week, and the categories are very much similar to ESSER 2. We have a total of $52,956,305. You can see 3 main categories that were budgeted. You were required to have 20% spent in your addressing learning loss. We have 37% budgeted in that. And then we also have in the air quality improvement, we have $8 million budgeted in there. And then the other category has 19.7 million or 37% as well. And that HVAC was 15%. So of those 3 categories, 89% of this approximately $53 million budget was in those 3 categories.
All right, any questions? I had one of the contract instructional services. I don't remember if we asked this at the board meeting, but what does that include? Is that our Admentum or is that something else?
Let me get to, which slide were you referring to? I'm trying to pull it up on my screen.
3, the
Oh, it was activities to address the unique needs of students,
Right.
contract instructional services. Yes, ma'am. There were children that had significant cognitive disabilities, and we needed to engage a vendor to provide learning opportunities for those children. So we were in compliance with making sure that they had the opportunity for learning environment, even COVID-19.
So that's Admentum.
Basically. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Actually, it's a second vendor because Edmonton could not help those children with the significant cognitive disabilities. So there were two contract positions that we did have to get through a second vendor because Admentum was limited on what they could provide for the ones with significant disabilities.
But overall, yes, it was for an external.
Right, okay.
Right.
And I've had some questions about, I think this, and I don't remember if this was where it was mentioned at our meeting, but somewhere with these funds, we have a private school allocation. Could you kind of talk about that a little bit so we can understand what that is and why we have it?
Yes, ma'am. In ESSER 1, we had an allocation to the private schools. I'm going to try to pull that right up on my other computer right now. And we have $31,760 remaining in that, so the private schools have not spent everything that they have been allocated at this time.
And may I also add another piece? When we received the ESSER funds, originally it was stated that a portion of it needed to be shared with private schools, and then we were given guidance that says we didn't have to. Because we had already met with our private schools and slated what their needs were, we went on and held our end of the bargain, if you will, and we still allocated those funds because we didn't want to then go back and change where we were in the process. We got in front of it, the team went to the private schools, met with them to outline what their needs were, and it had to be items that they had not already purchased. Because we needed to order those materials and then to pay for them and then distribute those materials to them. And so, like I said, there was some back and forth about do we or don't we. Like I said, originally it was we did, and then we were informed that we didn't. But again, because we had already sat down and pretty much, I would say, agreed, we just went on and fulfilled what our responsibility was in providing those materials.
But that was just ESSER 1.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So that's no longer being done.
So, no. You got the number?
Yes, ma'am. It is $348,710.45, and that was for 4 private schools. We followed our guidance that you have to advertise to all private schools, and only 4 took advantage of the opportunity to receive that funding, and we have $31,000 remaining.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
could Ms. Miller share with us which of those, you said it was 4 private schools, which of those private schools received funding?
I'll yield to the superintendent if I'm allowed to.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll let them remain anonymous at this point. Now, the money that's left, will we be free to use that? No, that's got to go to them.
Unfortunately, no, ma'am, we're not allowed to do that once it's been allocated to them, just like any of the other federal funds. It's for them to spend, and if they don't spend it by the deadline, the state just
It goes back.
retains the money.
Okay, all right.
Because this is a reimbursement grant, so we get reimbursed on that, so we don't have the funding, but once we spend it, we get reimbursed. So it's right now, we just don't reimburse ourselves for that.
Okay. All right, does anyone else have any questions? Okay, we can go on then.
All right. I'm trying to remember, we went through ESSER 3. There were no questions on that. That takes us to the Minority Business Enterprise Utilization Plan for 21-22. I believe the board voted to accept that plan. There was no change in the prior year's plan. And then I provided the board with an update semi-annually. The board had requested an update, and so I gave the January 2021 through June 30th, 21 update at last week's meeting.
Okay, any questions?
No.
Okay. All right, thank you so much, Ms. Miller, and thank you, Dr. Martin Knox, for giving us some more details on those reports from the board meeting.
May I go back to a couple of things? 'Cause I think
Sure,
it's
sure.
So Dr. Hilton, this goes back to the question you posed. So we've only been distributing the 10s. We should not have any 8s that are remaining because they have been used, but they should only be using 10s. So if we still have 10s in our school, I would make the plea, 8s in our school, I would make the plea that they stop utilizing them, and we'll send out a message just to make sure. But we've only been distributing tens. MERS, I'm sorry, I just started with the numbers.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
anything else?
And the other piece is to the masks. So all schools receive 2,000 masks, and they are distributing them within the building. The wipes and sanitizers were given directly to teachers as well. So I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledge the fact that we continue to distribute the PPE equipment, which is inclusive of the sanitization materials that are necessary for our schools to try and safeguard our building as much as we possibly can against this virus.
Madam Chair, before she moves on from the mask and being distributed in the schools, with today being the first day that masks have, the directive from the State Department that masks be implemented on our buses, and I know there was some discussion at our last meeting about whether those masks can be available on the bus. Could you just give us a little update if that has taken place or how smoothly today went?
So I do not have an answer for you, but I can get one. Many of our drivers are still transporting and probably heading back to their hubs now. And so we'll do, Mr. Myers meets with the supervisors every day or every other day just to get an update. But I can give you a definitive answer on how that went today. I don't have one right now.
Okay, thank you.
All right. We'll go on to the recommendations for steps moving forward. I would like to suggest that we do a follow-up with our salary scale with the full board and have some discussion about that. And also with the retention stipend. And then I would also for the full board give updates on some of the things we've discussed tonight, so they'll know where we are. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to take forward to the board, full board?
I concur with all those things you just said, Madam Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
If I would just add, if we could get maybe an update where we are as far as PPE equipment, like where do we stand as a district? Are we in good shape with PPE equipment, or do we foresee having to purchase additional PPE equipment right now? That could just be part of the update as well.
Yeah, and if it's readily available too, since everybody's still using the thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that sometimes is a problem. Okay. All right, anything else? Well, thank you all for being here and for the questions that you had. And again, thank you, Ms. Miller and Dr. Martin Knox, for the information that you've given us. And if there's nothing else, we will be adjourned at 6:57.
Thank you. Y'all have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.